Welcome, everyone. We're just going to give it a few minutes before we get started. Let other folks join. Again, welcome, everyone. We're just giving it a few minutes before we get started. Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, and good morning. My name is Natalie James. I'm the Coalition Builder for Prosperity Indiana, and I'll be your moderator this morning. It is a pleasure to have you participate on today's webinar, Evicted in Indiana, Part 3, The Health Implications of Eviction in Indiana. This webinar is sponsored by the Indianapolis Foundation and the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition. We're very thankful to have the Indianapolis Foundation, an affiliate of the Central Indiana Community Foundation, support our work through the Opportunity Starts at Home Indiana campaign, related to increasing rental assistance to improve housing stability for the lowest income residents in our community through coalition building and informing eviction prevention efforts during this critical time. The Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition was formed by members of Indiana's housing security advocacy community in April 2020 to support advocacy and education related to housing and homelessness prevention in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Staffed by Prosperity Indiana through advocacy and coalition building grants from the National Low Income Housing Coalition and the Central Indiana Community Foundation, the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition convenes partners from across Indiana to advocate for immediate, medium, and long-term housing stability policy solutions, and conduct education and research to achieve federal, state, and local policies for an equitable response and recovery to the pandemic and beyond. In 2016, Eviction Lab published a list ranking Indianapolis as the city with the second highest number of evictions in the nation, second only to New York City. In addition to Indianapolis, Fort Wayne and South Bend also made it onto the list. Despite a number of larger cities in Indiana ending up on the list, many of Indiana's smaller cities and rural areas actually have even higher rates of evictions. So this is truly a statewide problem that undercuts housing stability and the economy in communities across Indiana. Today, we will be hearing from a number of local experts about the health implications of eviction, especially during COVID-19. Towards the end, we'll have the opportunity for Q&A. And just some housekeeping. Please be aware that all audio is muted. If you would like to ask a question, there are two ways to do so. You can use the raise hand icon on your screen. We will unmute your line and you may ask your question or questions. You can always type your question or questions into the Q&A box, which is also located on your screen. We all know that technology can be trying these days, especially while working from home. So if you lose your connection, you may also reconnect using the link emailed to you. Finally, if you are a Prosperity Indiana member, after today's webinar, you can find both the presentation and recording available on housingforhoosiers.org under the Hoosier Housing Needs, or HHNC section, and it'll also be available to folks who are non-members as well. And now more information about Prosperity Indiana. For more than 30 years, Prosperity Indiana has mobilized members to create economic opportunities and improve social conditions, particularly for Hoosiers who are most disadvantaged. As a statewide cross-sector membership network of approximately 200 organizations and individuals, Prosperity Indiana's impact through members has strengthened communities and improved lives in rural, suburban, and urban areas in every county. It is our mission to build a better future for our communities by providing advocacy, leveraging resources, including providing training and consulting services, and engaging an empowered network of members to do this important work. Our members represent human services, the arts, legal aid, congregations, workforce development, real estate, health services, financial institutions, philanthropy, all levels of government, community action agencies, private and nonprofit affordable housing developers, local economic development organizations, and more. If you are not a current member, please go to prosperityindiana.org to learn more. This third webinar in the Evicted in Indiana series comes after two wonderful webinars about eviction in Indiana. If you'd like to learn more about how to get more information on eviction's toll in Indiana, please stay on and we will answer any questions and tell you how you can learn more and get involved. And now for our guest for the day. Our first guest is Ashley Gervitz, who believes in the power of advocacy and its ability to affect long-lasting change. As a dedicated neighbor to her Indianapolis's inside community, she believes in bringing together neighbors, community stakeholders, and other decision makers to strengthen and improve the quality of life. She also strives to be a good Christian, student, and engaged citizen, and provide teachings to equip others to feel empowered. She enjoys mentoring youth throughout Indianapolis and assisting other community initiatives. Ashley comes to us today from United Northeast. United Northeast Development Corporation. Sorry about that. Ashley?
Hi, how are you? Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Ashley. Feel free to go ahead and get started.
All right, wonderful. I'm really thankful today to have with me a phenomenal team. I have that of Ms. Summer Burks, who is our community health advocate through the Diabetes Impact Project. So we are one of 3 neighborhoods here within Marion County that is focused on diabetes impact. And what you'll learn today is how health from a social determinants of health lens very much impacts that of various aspects of housing, in particular around how we identify stabilization for some of our neighbors that are in critical need. With Summer, we are really thankful that she is going into year 2 of direct outreach in our Northeast Indianapolis community. Outside of her avid outreach within our area, she is very much known to be very much connected with arts and culture through dance, being a wonderful mom to 2 incredible human beings, and then of course continuing to spread a lot of empowerment through a lot of women's based initiatives. So we're really thankful Summer's with us today. And then next we have Miss Kinsey Brown. Mackenzie Brown is that of our community coordinator. We're really fortunate that our organization was able to bring on a public ally being very much connected to helping make a difference, community building, providing a great intersection of workforce development, life skills advancement, educational attainment, and just wraparound support of being able to discover how you can be a change agent in the community. Ms. Kinsey's with us, and really, really thankful that she's jumped right in and has done some amazing work here for our area. Kinsey, before starting her Public Allies experience with us, actually has that of a great background within mental health, working within IUPUI's Counseling Center, one of on the IUPUI campus. But most in particular, she has a great dynamic connection as well of being able to bring a new light and lens with another collaborative of emerging leaders right here within our city. All right. So at this time, I am going to go ahead and show our presentation we have here for you today. And bear with me for a moment as I navigate here. I think I was able to get the full screen up here. So again, our focus is that of understanding what has this ripple effect of eviction caused here within Indiana. Our work itself is based here within Central Indiana, Northeast Indianapolis in particular. And so our presentation that you'll learn today is going to bring a light from a community development lens at an incorporating factor of social determinants of health. Now, before we actually get into our presentation, I want to make sure time is understood about the work we actually do.
Hi, Ashley. I'm so sorry to interrupt. I don't think we're actually seeing your screen at this moment. So you should have privilege. You just need to click share screen. Perfect. There it is.
Fabulous. Thank you. I know I pressed one button, but I didn't realize the show screen on the other. So thank you for that catch. So Monday in technology. So we're going to make it through. But what we have here for the United Northeast Community Development Corporation is our commitment to standing by our founding with residents in 1995 within the area. At the time, community very much due to some very major economic loss started to gain some areas of vulnerability and disparity. So with its origination, we are still striving through the United Northeast CDC today to keep that of the collective of our work very much alive. We do so through the educating of our Northeast Indianapolis community about the various means of quality life, and we do so through workshops, advocacy campaigns, and community events. We elevate the opportunity of quality of life planning through various action teams, which are all done through asset-based development which does include that of the planning, initiative, and communication-based efforts. In addition of our elevating, we ensure that every neighbor has access to safe, sanitary, and housing that is affordable, which most in particular, that everyone does have quality, which could be expanded even to include that of our diverse housing opportunities. Other areas of focus include that of enhancing the economic and social mobility of opportunities, which typically have been present within our area. We're working with about 84% persons of color within our area of focus. 92% of those are Black. So working through those barriers that have made this widened racial disparities gap is something every day, whether through our residents, education programming, we do so to help shrinken that. Then lastly, it's our goal of encouraging our neighbors to improve one's quality well-being by improving their health. And you'll learn a little bit more through our focus of community social determinants of health and how we are tackling that. All right. So before we get started, there's one component that's very critical for the knowledge of how we will navigate through today's presentation. It is very critical to realize that housing is more than a roof over one's head. It is an essential to one's overall health and well-being. So it's great that many of us are fortunate to have a place to rest our head at night, but we have to look at the true realities. Many are unhoused, do not have that of stable environments. It could be that of maybe repairs needed to their overall homes. It could be that of being transient and not having a place day by day to, call their own. So with it, we will then really see how it's had its impacts, where it's really exposed a lot of major disparities, even through COVID. Some of the areas of social determinants of health that our office really focuses on to see equitably, we are doing everything to build equity-based and resilient-based communities. Major elements of that, and I won't go through them all, include, of course, affordable quality housing, access to care, that does include that of the clinical, even some of the internal bits, mental health, and some of the subsidiaries of that, economic opportunities, education, environmental, food access is major. And then just the overall aspect we have to consider as well, just our overall coming together through the social and cultural cohesions. With everything that you see as far as the elements of a healthy community, we must always remember that of the fabric of how communities have been built before. So it's very imperative that there's always a lens of adjusting to some of the social injustices that have occurred in the past, but most in particular, as we look into building sustainable communities today, you'll see on the diagram to the right, we always look at people first. Everyone, again, deserves that of a quality life, the ability of gaining knowledge that can help attain and include better access of women, minorities, children into developing what does a healthy community look like. In addition to that, it is always knowing there's a level of dignity into fighting a lot of the inequalities that we have daily. And that does include various aspects of poverty and the contributors of it. Prosperity. Everybody deserves, hands down, the ability to grow, to be strong, be strengthened, and transformed. And we know the power of what a dollar can bring. So just imagine how a community can be strong from a health aspect by seeing stabilizations of funds. We'll learn a little bit later on from Summer about the importance that if you can't focus in on maybe your diabetes and your insulin, we should be able to have that of a healthy living wage, which doesn't mean people have to depend if I'm going to choose today to have my medicine or see that of if I'm going to be able to feed my family. And then, of course, no matter what, no one person has the answer. No one person has the answer. It is very much as we are doing the work of social determinants of health of community to see that of the power of collective impact and partnership. If we were able to send the catalyzation of what you and I do daily and help couple that into the work of others, we really would be able to strengthen our means of our community. Now up next, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Mackenzie, where she'll share a little bit more information relative to her story and other aspects that she believes very important for social determinants of health.
All right, thank you, Ashley. Like Ashley said before, housing is more than a roof over one's head. It's essential to one's health and well-being. And I bring that up again because I want to talk some more about mental health. And just to know, eviction crisis is a mental health crisis. So we are protecting ourselves at home. Our home is supposed to be our safe place. And when we are on the verge of losing our home, that can mess up with our mental health. During this time, before COVID, 47 million Americans said they have a mental health illness. At this time, because of COVID, that has doubled. And there's times when people are choosing to pay their rent, the other utilities and other bills instead of their medication. And without their medication, whatever kind of mental illness they have, they can have episodes, they can't deliver, they can't get out of bed. And so people are taking other routes to coping mechanism. And if you notice today, liquor sales are going crazy. And, some people are like, oh, we're just having fun. But if you really think about it, are some people really having fun? People who can't afford medication, depending on their insurance, it's a lot easier to go to a liquor store and get a cheap liquor bottle or whatever for $5, $7 than going to get your medication when that, depending on your type of medication, that's $80. So people are taking other routes of that. And that's really concerning at this time. And also getting assistance is very hard. If you have more than $5,000 in your savings, you can be denied. And that $5,000 cannot last you forever. If you really think about it, rent $1,200, you still gotta pay IPL, you still gotta get food in the house, gas. So that $5,000 can be gone in a month or two. And you're denied because you have that little bit amount in there. And that's hurting. It's just not the low income, it's the middle class is being hurt as well. And when people feel like they can't help and they can't be there, that's when depression loves to come in. And definitely we've been in COVID since March and it's winter now. And what happens in winter? We lose our sun. Our sun keeps us going most of the time. It's getting dark very sooner now. That seasonal depression is coming. So I just want to take that time for people to, make sure they take care of themselves, find other ways. If you can't get your medication, there's other ways. Music can help, yoga, exercising, even if it's cold outside, and just get some fresh air. You have animals, walk your dog. Hey, people walk their cat, walk your cat. They like to be outside too sometimes. So just take this time to know that there are other people who are hurting out here in mental health, and it's very important. And that's all I have. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it back to Ashley.
Great, wonderful job, Kinsey. And I am very happy that you are highlighting a critical thing that also intertwines each and every one of us. We never know that of the silent battles one may be seeking, but has truly been amplified just due to so much unprecedented times and chaos and lots of changes and uncertainty. So the information you provided relative to health is great. And I do have to admit that while many of us, no matter how we are connected to community, there are some that do see it from a faith lens. I've always been a firm believer, and hopefully through the content Kinsey has talked about, realize that you can have your faith, but also have clinical too. So thank you again for highlighting an important thing. Now, other aspects for our consideration here, outside of mental health and the impacts of what it can do and have its rippling effects into housing as a whole. Now, if, for instance, you might have a household that's been impacted due to unemployment, we see its implications where thankfully right now, until December 31st, we have a moratorium in place. But what will it have its impacts on our market instability? Will that happen? Will we lose that of opportunities where maybe someone's evicted, but due to the current processes of filling out an application and having places that are eviction friendly, will that increase our already alarming numbers of homelessness? Other things too for our consideration. Again, outside the fact that Kinsey talked about the social isolation, the depression, anxiety, suicides that are there. Can it also occur where even within healthcare, where some might have the ability of a telephone, but there's that need of maybe the face-to-face interaction for care, or the delay of different appointments, disrupted service, and being able to have the care be reduced can again have many implications, and have it further exacerbated if there's already a lack of health care, other structural inequities, maybe bias in the type of care that's there. And it's very important that we consider, even from the lens of housing. Now, these are just a couple examples you see on the screen, but we do have to look at the facts. Say, for instance, from employment, you may be still thankful to be employed today, but what if you are now in greater contact and exposure? If there are inadequate social distancing procedures put in place, you come home, your household's already crowded. Have we now transmitted the spread of disease further within our households? So any aspects of how healthy communities thrive, it is all very much interconnected. And we have to do our best to be very much acknowledging the fact that there are, again, some structural and systematic oppressions like racism, bias, and various areas of discrimination that also do play into the facts of us growing a gap, which really collectively we could be stronger if we came together. Other things for consideration, again, I know briefly talked about the renters, landlords, and affordable housing market impacts, but think about too, maybe there's a delay of the hardship relief from the housing, economic barriers, maybe families before that would qualify for benefits aren't sure how to even navigate it now. So it's very important to address that. Stay-at-home orders, while it could be a safe haven for some, may ultimately be someone's worst nightmare. Thinking about some of the unsafe lenses, whether it's domestic issues, from a relational conflicts, brewing at home, unsanitary, overcrowding spaces. could easily prompt further transmission of COVID-19. Even from, community spaces, we got to be very mindful of the best practices, because it doesn't matter your background, your age, your geographical location, even what's in your pocket. It has its impacts of taking lives. And again, we need to see that these impacts are critical, and we have to do everything possible to improve. So something to keep in mind here is that, again, with COVID and health, many may have not been with clinical care before. Right now, we are seeing that of a lot of the pre-existing adversities within affordable housing now come to light and be further exposed to show the disproportionality that people of low or modest means have now been impacted by. Lastly, if we do not help people stay in their homes and address the needs of homelessness, we will just exacerbate our crisis, and it's only going to speed up the transmission and all of the things we've done before. We happen to be seeing it right now where, again, as a state, high alarming numbers, well, way too many that have been infected in the thousands daily, and even two have lost their lives. And again, maybe that person is the head of household that's now gone. We really need to be thinking in this aspect of preparedness and resiliency, so again, we can all thrive. Up next, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to Summer Burks, where she's going to be able to provide a lens of how we are within the organization. And her work in particular with the Diabetes Impact Project is focused on health advocacy and ensuring, no matter if it's the focal point of addressing COVID or diabetes, that again, we want to look at things from a holistic aspect of care. So, Summer?
All right. Hello, you all hear me? All right, great. So as she mentioned, my name is Summer Burks, and I'm the certified community health worker for Unique. So from my lens, like she says, it's mostly advocacy work, but the reason why it's really important right now is because COVID and diabetes together is a really dangerous mix, and it has extreme impacts on the person that's sick and then anybody else around, just kind of how it all comes together. And how this kind of ties in with homelessness is, if you're going to add homelessness on top of that, which of course for anybody, it's going to create an issue. But when you add that element to it, now we no longer have a place to possibly refrigerate our medication. Now we may not have a place to maintain some of the live food that we need so that we can maintain a healthy existence the best we can if we're in a food desert. Now we may not have the place to administer the medicine that we need to, or get the amount of rest that we need to, or properly care for our extremities because we're in the elements now. And those are really important components to living with diabetes. So that's one portion of it. But how homelessness came across my table is in doing block walks and doing work within Unique. So we're going out in the community, I'm knocking on doors, so you assume they have a house. But we're knocking on doors and we're finding multiple families, or finding one house I knocked on, I thought people were in the resident, but they were actually living in the car outside of the house. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play, as all I'm trying to do is ask, hey, do you know your status regarding diabetes? So it turns into a much larger, more robust experience, because it is the entire human through advocacy work, through Unique. I'm trying to stay on topic with that. So if you're homeless and you're reliant on a food pantry for food, so now we have to be cognizant of what we're getting to maintain our health. And can you get this in a reasonable time in different places? Can you get there? Do you know where they are? Do you speak the language so that you can get these necessary tools for your health? So all those play a factor in what we try to do and what we do on a daily basis. Food access and homelessness are big issues. They're not separate issues though. And they kind of have to be addressed together and they work together. Then with diabetes, and let me give you a bit of a background really quickly. Three neighborhoods were selected for the Indianapolis area. And this is how the Diabetes Impact Project came to be. And I apologize, I didn't explain that clearly. Out of the 3 neighborhoods, the one that I'm currently in, we were ranked the highest. The number of people with diabetes and deaths and amputations and that type of thing that were happening was extremely high in the area that I'm in, which is why I was brought in. But to couple that with what was considered a food desert, then to couple that with lack of housing, and you have a whirlwind of problems. So what I'm brought in to do and with the team that I'm with and what we're trying to do, and what I hope you're getting in this messaging today is we're trying to go one person at a time, but we kind of have to make a bigger impact than one person at a time because it's such a large concern. So going through the neighborhood, talking to the people, putting our ears to the ground to find out what your needs are. Do you even know that this should be a need? Because I found that as well. You might even know the needs that you actually have because you've been doing this for so long. So it starts there, getting to know the person, to get to know the situation. Because I'm a community health worker, I'm able to get into places that doctors can't. I'm able to get information that doctors often don't get. Because usually when we go to the doctor, we kind of put on a show. We're not always very honest about our health or what's really happening, or you don't have access to a doctor. But being a community health worker, I'm able to speak directly to that. I'm not a doctor, so I can't speak completely medically, but they will talk to me very honestly about a lot of concerns, or we can talk very candidly about things, and we can speak about medicine, but we can talk about, I can take it from a holistic standpoint too, because this is what you have access to. So that's kind of how we work together on that, and that's what we do, or that's what I try to do, and that's what the organization allows me to continue to do daily. And then we combat this with helping people get access to food, helping people gain access to homes or some form of sheltered living so that they can then start the next step of, I don't say revamping their life, but kind of changing the trajectory. So that's what we do. That's what I do. I hope that's clear. And any other questions after this, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Perfect. Thank you, Summer. And I'm really happy that you highlighted that the one-on-one alone with that, it's still making a difference. It's progress. And it's very important to embody that aspect of trust, to be able to identify the fact of we can take something, maybe some of the, now that the Band-Aids with COVID have been ripped off and we're seeing the true realities, it's not just the one approach of, hey, let's go get you tested or vaccine, and then you have it, and then you're quarantined. What's happening at home? So holistically, we can do everything we can to stabilize our households. And with that, just a couple things to wrap up to keep in mind. Now, how we solve this, there are many ways you can address it. But one thing I wanted to point out is a great document from AARP. They are very much focused on the livability factors and demands of how we are addressing COVID-19 as a whole. Not to pick up too much time, but I do want to highlight the fact that if you're looking at health services and community supports, you know, make sure you work with the municipal offices. I know the city as a whole with Indy Rents program helps some aspect of being able to subsidize some relief. We still got to keep advocating to see that further extended because a moratorium is one thing, but if you haven't worked, the debt's still accruing, right? So we're still not looking into that long-term continuum. Also, in addition, seeing where there's additional conduct of wellness checks, check on your neighbor, check on your peers, make some phone calls. Just because, again, social isolation is very real. and improve the aspects of the healthy, fresh foods. And if anything that COVID's taught us, we can rapidly and collectively come together and shift the paradigm. Things before, they used to take a while to get the ball moving from a policy bit. We're at a critical time. Everybody's impacted. This is the power of people, where, again, some of the outline domains that you're seeing, we could definitely do so. And no matter what, be mindful of the fact that your life is very much interconnected with others. So do everything you can to put together those emergency preparedness bits with safety resources, but also to implement in your life the best social distancing practices, and assure that we are all much putting health in priorities for everyone. So again, I thank you so much for your time. We went over a little bit of our 30 minutes here, but again, we'll be sticking around for more. But if you like to identify other ways that we are trying to make an impact within Northeast Indianapolis, we have our website of www.anewimpact.org, which is our collective community impact page, which directs you to all of our United Northeast CDC effort works. And for telephone number, we have our direct dial for general support at 317-546-6240. So again, thank you so much for your time.
And thank you, Ashley, and Summer and Kenzie, for all that awesome information. And that policy bit was a great pivot to actually our next guest, Darius Ross, who will talk a bit about how policy advocacy can really go to support residents of affordable housing and low-income residents. So Darius Ross is the founder and CEO of the Ross Foundation and an Indianapolis native born and raised on the city's Far East Side. Growing up as a kid, Darius was able to see how the community lacked youth programs, resources, and community involvement. Due to this, the rise in crime, drug usage, and poverty took a toll on the community. Now being older and a respected leader of the community, he decided to start his own foundation in 2014. The mission of the Ross Foundation is to take the community out of survival mode into thriving mode by creating effective youth programs, preparing our communities, and developing leaders. The Ross Foundation oversees the first tenants' rights union in the state of Indiana. Darius currently serves on the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition, which supports advocacy and education related to housing and homelessness prevention in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Mr. Ross has been recognized locally and nationally for his accomplishments in the community. Welcome, Dee.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? All right. Yes, so I am the founder of the Ross Foundation, which oversees the Indianapolis Tenants' Rights Union. Our mission is to create housing justice through empowerment-based education, outreach, leadership development, organizing, and advocacy. We want to create concrete improvements in tenants' living conditions and challenge and transform unjust housing policies and practices. This program encompasses the following: educating and informing residents about tenants' rights under local, state, and federal law, giving them access to pro bono legal services, coaching and support, providing home literacy and financial literacy classes, partnering to support tenants in need of rental assistance, full-time tenant advocates working to effectively organize around eradicating poverty, discrimination, and homelessness. And we've been established for a year and a half with our Tenants' Rights Union, but with the Ross Foundation, we've been doing tenant advocacy for 6 years. And some of the biggest issues that we have experienced during this pandemic, well, I want to first start off by saying housing is healthcare, like my friend Amy Nelson always states, because that's the foundation. And a lot of things trickles down all the way back to housing when we're talking about focusing on the root causes of systemic poverty or violence or mental health and trauma or homelessness. And I like to tell this story a lot to relate to healthcare because I was working with an elderly lady elderly Black lady that lived on the far east side of Indianapolis, who was unlawfully put out of her home earlier this year. And 2 weeks later, she catches COVID-19 because she was living house to house. She had 5 children, and at times she had to live out of her car, and she ended up becoming homeless. And so she was hospitalized due to COVID-19, and a week later she died. And so I like to share that story is the importance of before COVID-19, we had so many different pre-existing conditions in Black and Brown communities, especially if we want to be particular. Disproportionately across the board, we have so many different health disparities, and we suffer from so many different things. It's a long list. We'll sit here all day. But I wanted to highlight that fact is because when the pandemic hit, and we're already disproportionately being evicted the most, and then if you look at the health studies, we're more likely to catch COVID-19 the most disproportionately. And so when someone is evicted or become homeless, they can end up becoming, they could be more targeted for catching or attracting COVID-19. And so housing is healthcare. That's the foundation. If she was never put out of her home unlawfully, she could possibly still be alive today. And I just want that to sit in with everyone for a deep moment, because as we speak, there are a lot of landlords and property managers and property owners targeting residents left and right, trying to figure out any way to evict them, unlawfully evicting them, and taking advantage of these tenants. And so with this pandemic, it's hard. It's even harder because a lot of residents can't go to their family houses or friends' homes because they fear of contracting COVID-19. And so we have to limit the risk of spreading the virus even more. And so what we have been doing, especially in this middle of this pandemic, is we hired over 20 neighborhood tenant advocates throughout the year on each side of town to go door to door to do canvassing, to figure out what the need is. If they have housing issues, do they need a letter to write to the judge, or do they need connections to a lawyer? Are they updated with the evictions moratoriums and the executive orders that's given by the governor? We come to find out that a lot of families did not have access to internet, Wi-Fi, transportation, television, or telephone. And so we wanted to fill that gap as much as possible and educate them and inform them of the updated executive orders, inform them of their rights, and then also get them involved, empower them to get involved, to become independent, to stand up about unlawful legislation that is. So one of the laws we have is we cannot withhold rent, even if you live in inhabitable living conditions. And a lot of people tend to hold their rent, not knowing that law. And we're one of the few states in America that still allows this to happen. And so this is the importance of the Tenants' Rights Union is we have to mobilize and galvanize people to advocate for these type of laws, to change these laws. It's no reason we should be number 2 in evictions filed behind New York City, and we're not nearly the size of that population. That's how you know it's more than people not just paying their rent. They're being discriminated against, being targeted, not knowing their rights, being misinformed, or being taken advantage of. And so what we have formed is also on top of our canvassing, we have formed our home literacy / financial literacy classes. which is sponsored by Fair Housing of Central Indiana. And this year was the first year we rolled this out. It's a 6 to 7 week course where we bring in tenants all across the Marion County to be a part of this class, and we educate them on how to understand their lease, how to understand fair housing violations, how to understand tenant rights, how to open up a bank account. As far as financial literacy is a gap, and so a lot of tenants that we have ran into have paid money under the table and been taken advantage of, not knowing that they need a receipt, not knowing to create a money order. A lot of them have different barriers and gaps in that process. We have also run into tenants living in mold, living in feces, ceilings caved in, water, when it rains, it comes down the wall and creates mushrooms and more mold. Children are breathing in this mold every single day as we speak. Who's standing up for them? And so this is the importance of the Tenants Rights Union, to bring education to the communities that's in need, that's been taken advantage of the most, and help transform them into a livable, safer conditions. And we want to make sure that these tenants are empowered, not fearing retaliation, to speak out about what they see and what's going on in their community. And that comes with trust and building relationships long term, and not just coming in and saying, hey, we're here short term to help you guys. No, we want to build a long term relationship with you guys, so you can feel empowered and trust that we will take care of that issue, and also be supportive of you in that circumstance. And so, yeah, we do a little more than the Ross with the Tenants Rights Union, and we're expanding. We're building tenant unions across the state of Indiana, because in order to change laws and legislation, we have to mobilize the state, and we have to have them in agreement. And there's been a lot of issues for too long in the state of Indiana that has been covered, and it's time for them to be uplifted. And so I'm thankful for being on this call, and I just want you guys to remember that story I told you about the elderly Black lady who had 5 children, who ended up losing her life for being unlawfully put out of her home and catching COVID-19. Disproportionately, Black and brown families are catching COVID-19 at an alarming rate. And this time, we cannot wait 4 more years, 2 more years. We have to do the work now. We have to come together and unify. We have to figure out all the resources that exist out here and unify, so we can be on the same page to saving our communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dee. That was some great information. And to follow up with that information, we have our policy director, Andrew Bradley, who will talk a little bit about the policy priorities for the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition. And following him, I can talk about how you can get involved in policy advocacy. And also, while Andrew is speaking, feel free to add any questions to the chat or the question box that you would like for our presenters to answer. Andrew?
Thanks so much, Natalie, and thanks to Ashley, Summer, Kinsey, and Dee for being part of this webinar. And thanks to everybody on this webinar for joining us in this journey of Evicted in Indiana. I want to emphasize what Dee was just talking about, that housing is healthcare, and that this COVID pandemic has really brought a new fire underneath the already existing eviction crisis.
Mm-hmm. We actually can't hear you now, Andrew, for some reason.
How about that? Okay. I was going to say, if you could go ahead and go to the next slide. What I want to talk about are some of the urgent policy priorities that the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition has come up with. And these are some of the things that Natalie is going to talk with you about, how you can help us take action during the next session of the Indiana General Assembly and the incoming Congress. So if we could go ahead to that next slide. Oop, lost it here.
Andrew, we actually do not have any more slides.
Oh. Well, is it possible for me to share my screen?
Yes, it is. Let me make you presenter.
Okay, so the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition has put together several priorities in order to help make sure that no Hoosier is evicted or made homeless due to the pandemic. Because just as our guests today were describing, anytime you have people put out of their homes and having to couch surf, stay with others, or be in congregate settings like in homeless shelters, that not only risks their health, but it risks the health of the entire community, as well as the long-term economic stability from housing instability. So first of all, the first thing that we're looking for is that Congress must include housing stability resources in the next COVID relief package. We support the recommendations of the National Low Income Housing Coalition. They have estimated that nationwide $100 billion is needed in order to prevent evictions, and that would cover the estimated 100,000 to over 250,000 evictions that Indiana could see. So that's number one, is that we need Indiana's federal congressional delegation to step up and support that plan. At the state level, there are still some actions that our policymakers can take, even while we're waiting for Congress to act. And one of those is that Governor Holcomb should appoint a housing stability lead and task force. There are up to $700 million still sitting on the table from the CARES Act that could be put into reopening Indiana's rental assistance program in a more flexible way in order to help more Hoosiers throughout the state. But what we need is for both the voices of tenants and residents and also housing providers and public health experts to be part of that process to make sure that the need or the rental assistance gets where it's needed the most. We also want to see a housing stability dashboard on the state's COVID website so that folks like everyone on the line here could be able to track how many evictions are happening due to COVID in counties throughout the state and what the results of those rental assistance programs are so we can know how effective they've been. As far as the upcoming state General Assembly, the first thing that people on this line can do, take note of this. We will be following up with specific actions you can take. The first thing we want to make sure is that the General Assembly does no additional harm. If you might recall from last session, there was a bill, Senate Bill 148, that's SB 148, that had been passed that would have expanded evictions and it would have preempted local cities and counties from being able to enact their own protections. So as you may have heard throughout this series, Indianapolis has a new tenants' rights ordinance. That would be wiped out if the veto of this bill were to be overridden. So we are going to follow up with this webinar with an opportunity for you to reach out to your legislators and let them make sure that above all else that they do no additional harm and expand evictions during this cold COVID winter that we're going to see. Beyond that, we have a number of other priorities that right now we're working with legislators to have them draw up legislative language. And these include things like creating an eviction expungement process that would make it so that if folks do end up evicted, that it's easier for them to be able to find new housing, that record doesn't trail them for many years. We want to make sure that tenants have a right to see their tenant screening records so that they know if there is a wrongful eviction filed on their record, that they have a chance to clear that up. We want to create a problem-solving housing court to be able to test effective remedies. And this is a place where you could test out what Dee was talking about earlier, where it would make it possible for folks to be able to put rent into escrow if there are housing code violations, for example. And another thing that we're looking for is to make sure that we're prohibiting housing discrimination, including that based on the source of income. And what I mean by that is currently, even in Indiana's emergency rental assistance programs, landlords can turn those down. They don't have to accept that emergency help. and then they could still evict tenants for failure to pay. So if we were to get rid of that discrimination by source of income, it would mean that that emergency assistance would go farther. So folks on this line have just seen a sneak preview of these policy priorities that are going to be released publicly in the next few days. And again, the thing to be looking for is that action alert about how to make sure that we don't expand evictions during this time.
Thank you, Andrew. And just as a follow-up to the policy priorities, some marching orders, if you will, for how to get involved with policy advocacy is first signing up for updates using the interest form that will be included in the follow-up email to this webinar. And of course, as Andrew emphasized, calling your state legislators about SB 148 and asking them not to overturn the veto. And feel free, also to connect with me if you did read and use the Evicted in Indiana reading guide and are interested in learning more about local efforts to combat eviction and housing insecurity in Indiana. I will drop my email in the chat. That's njames@prosperityindiana.org. And also, upcoming, we are at Prosperity releasing an initiative called the Opportunity Starts at Home Coalition, which is a federal level policy advocacy effort to combat low-income, issues with low-income housing for tenants. The Opportunity Starts at Home Coalition is unique because it functions to bring together folks from lots of different sectors, such as racial equity, healthcare, housing, education, and more, to really get behind these issues. And so if anyone is interested in any of those things, feel free to follow up with me and definitely sign up for the alerts using the link that will be included in the follow-up email. Let me see if any of the panelists have a few minutes to answer questions. Here's a question for you, Dee. You've addressed some of the most egregious situations in bad landlords, all which must be addressed in order to further communicate and cooperate. What are you doing to address issues landlords are experiencing?
Yeah, can you repeat that?
Yes, so what essentially are you doing to combat the issues that landlords are experiencing?
Combat the issues that landlords are experiencing or tenants are experiencing?
Landlords. This person asked, Jim asked that, he stated that essentially you're, talking about some of the issues that tenants are dealing with, but what are some of the issues, that you focus on that landlords are dealing with?
Well, I think one of the things is education, tenants' rights education, when it comes to home literacy education, financial literacy education. That could go a long way to helping landlords, property owners, property managers, where, in some cases that, you do run into some tenants who are uninformed or not educated in those type of areas. So really, there's never really been a grassroots home literacy course that's meeting people where they are. And so this is different, a type of approach to bringing those type of educational seminars right to them. And so they don't have to go to a particular building or a particular office to get this type of information. We're coming to the people, meeting them where they are, making sure they have the tools and equipment to be able to join this class. And we're educating them. And we also, our goal is to transform them into either better livable renters or home ownership. And so we prepare them for the proper steps, but also we're a pro tenants. And so if, a lot of times we are on the other end of the spectrum dealing with landlords dealing with property managers and holding them accountable. But if it doesn't have to come to holding them accountable, we like to work together with them to improve the living conditions of our tenants collectively. But if it results in them not wanting to cooperate or work together, then the other, being more radical can take place.
Thank you, Dee. We have one last question for Andrew. As SB 148 demonstrates, Indiana elected officials prioritize owners' rights over tenants' rights. The upcoming legislative session is a budget session which dominates the proceedings. How does the coalition hope to get these agenda items in front of legislators and get them to act in any meaningful way?
That's a great question. And I do think this session is going to be different than any that we've seen in the past. Folks on the line may have heard that the Indiana Senate is going to meet throughout their full chamber with some members up in the galleries. The House is actually going to meet not in the House chamber at all, but across the street in the Indiana Government Center. And while we've heard that the public is going to be able to testify by going to a separate room as committees and videoing in, what we're not sure about yet is what it will look like for folks to be able to fully be in touch with their lawmakers. But we at Prosperity Indiana and through the Hoosier Housing Needs Coalition, we're dedicated to make sure that voices are heard. And part of the agenda that I provided is we're trying to look for places that have the best chance of moving forward during this session. What I would say with Senate Bill 148 is that, just as a reminder, vetoes can be overturned in Indiana with a simple majority in both houses. So what we need to do and what we're trying to do is even before the holidays, before people go away and then come back for the session, that you take the time, everybody on this line, to reach out to your legislators, and before it's a live issue in a short-term time frame, have that conversation with them about why it's important to do no harm. And then also we'll provide information for you to have the conversation with them about some proactive things that they can do to rebuild housing stability. And we definitely have an eye towards how to build housing affordability and security in the future as well. But the first thing is to make sure, again, do no harm and don't have any more spread of COVID through evictions and homelessness.
Well, thank you, Andrew, and thank you again to all of our presenters for today. And once again, you'll be able to find all of these webinars that were in the series, in addition to the reading guide, on the Housing for Hoosiers website, which the link is here. And feel free to use your phone to scan the screen if you'd like to get it that way. And again, if you'd like to follow up or need any other information, feel free to reach out to me at njames@prosperityindiana.org. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and have a great afternoon.